Brilliant. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Are You Charging Enough for Your REGOs? Or in the spirit of trying to stay as jargon free as possible, are you charging enough for your renewable energy guarantees of origin? My name is Emma Bridge. I'm the Chief Executive of Community Energy England, and we're delighted to be partnering today with Big Clean Switch to bring you this event. Today's event aims to help empower you to better understand what renewable energy guarantees of origin are, how they're used, what the price rises mean for you, and also what time matching is and how it could help community projects to offer local tariffs. We're going to have two speakers today. Firstly, Jon Fletcher, founder of green energy specialist Big Clean Switch, and Toby Ferenczi, founder of Granular. And we're also being supported today by Lisa West, our membership officer. So first, just a couple of bits of housekeeping. Please do introduce yourself on your chat with both your name and your organisation. Any questions that you have for the speakers, also please put in the chat. Lisa and I will be collating those as the session goes, and we'll put them to the presenters at the end of the session. However, if there are any points of clarification or jargon or so on, we'll pick that up in the meantime. This event is being recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel, so do turn your camera off if you don't wish to be seen as part of the recording. So just quickly a little bit about Community Energy Fortnight. Hopefully you've realised that this event is being brought to you as part of the fortnight. This is a nationwide campaign that started on the 10th of June and is running through to the 23rd. And it's a really great opportunity to make your organisation's activities visible to your local community, and also to show others what community energy is about and the difference it can make. This year, the fortnight is particularly looking at sharing skills. So looking at how we can help each other to implement new projects, innovate, improve and grow. And I really do encourage you to take part in any way you can. Look at our website, we've got resources on there. There's lots of events going on, social media, blogs and so on. And for those of you that might not have come across Community Energy England before, we are the national network and representative body for community energy, with a membership of over 270 community energy groups and a range of other supportive organisations. We are a strong and unified voice for all community-led energy projects and services, and we work closely with politicians, national and regional local government, network operators, suppliers, funders, and many others to work towards a more supportive policy, regulatory and finance landscape for community energy. All of our work is intended to help to clear obstacles, create connections, find solutions, and thereby creating a thriving community energy sector integrated into and truly powering a fair zero carbon energy system. So with no further ado, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker, Jon Fletcher.
Thanks very much. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. I was saying to the others earlier, I've been having some issues with Zoom this week, so if there are any problems, then do please flag it in the chat and we can try and work out what's going on. We've deliberately phrased the title of today's session as a question. We don't necessarily know the answer, whether you are charging enough for your REGOs or not, but what we wanted to do, following some conversations that we as Big Clean Switch have had with some renewables projects and community projects in particular lately, was to talk through some of the changes that have been going on in terms of how renewable energy guarantees of origin, or REGOs, are priced, and flag that for you in order to kind of talk through what the implications might be for you as people in the community energy sector. It's great that I can see we've got some both community generators and also suppliers who are buying power off community projects on the call, because I think it would be really interesting to hear both of those perspectives when we come to the Q&A. In terms of kind of what I'm going to try and cover, I'll give a brief overview of who we are, because many of you probably haven't heard of us, and then a quick reminder on the basics. So what exactly are REGOs? How are REGOs used by energy suppliers? And then also, equally importantly, how are REGOs used by corporates in their carbon reporting? And then, of course, a quick look at what's been happening recently with REGO prices and some thoughts about what that might mean for community energy projects. And then I'm going to hand over to Toby from Granular, who I'm really pleased has been able to join us today, who's going to be looking forward at some of the changes that are taking place within the renewable certificates landscape, and particularly the increased use of hourly matching, where certificates are tagged in terms of when power was generated, and the purchase of certificates may be looking to purchase power generated within particular timeframes. But before we do that, just a very quick recap on who we are and what we do. Big Clean Switch is a B Corp. We were set up in 2017, initially as a platform to help households to switch to renewable energy. We now provide a range of services, both to corporates, helping them to procure green energy and certificates, topical for today, and also to households, and we're increasingly combining those by providing a range of services to employers to help their employees to reduce their energy consumption and costs at home. What are REGOs? And on one level, it's very simple, and another, it's an area that kind of tends to have people scratching their heads. The difficulty when a household or a company wants to buy power on green power on a shared grid, where all of the generation sources are putting into the same mix, is that it's impossible for them to be able to say, well, I'm only taking the green electricity from the grid. And REGOs, in my book, perform the function of effectively creating that supply and demand relationship between somebody who wants to use their purchasing power to drive a more renewable, lower carbon grid, and the actual generation sources. And the way they work, and most of you know this, of course, already, is that every time a renewable generator supplies a megawatt of power to the grid, they can be issued by, in the UK, Ofgem, with a certificate called a Renewable Energy Guarantee of Origin that proves that that power has been supplied to the grid. And so a purchaser of power can acquire those certificates and then cancel them to avoid anyone else claiming them, and therefore effectively ring fence a proportion of the green power that's supplied to that grid for themselves. And the notion that underpins the whole system is that the more people who are buying certificates, the higher the demand and the greater the incentives for investment in new renewables are, and therefore the lower the carbon intensity of the grid gets. Now, REGOs have had a pretty checkered history, and I think it would be fair to say that for most of that history, that relationship hasn't necessarily been working in the correct way. And I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts later, but certainly for many of the generators and suppliers that we've spoken to in the past, REGO pricing has historically not necessarily even been enough to warrant a line on a spreadsheet, let alone being a factor that's been driving, additional and greater investment in development of new renewables. But we're hoping that that is a landscape that is starting to change, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to arrange the call today. It's worth mentioning that there are a lot of different terms bandied around in this space. REGOs are the UK version of something called an energy attribute certificate, and they are known by different acronyms in different parts of the world, the most common probably being guarantees of origin in Europe and renewable energy certificates, or RECs, in the US and Canada. So in order to kind of understand what's going on with pricing and how it might affect you as community energy projects, or of course as suppliers, it's worth recapping both on how REGOs are used by energy suppliers and also in a moment how they're used in carbon reporting. So suppliers are obliged to report on their fuel mix through what's called the fuel mix disclosure system, and wherever they are marketing a tariff as being green, whether that's to households or to corporates, then they have to have backed the proportion of that tariff that they're marketing as green with REGOs. And you can see here in terms of the, I've picked out a couple of suppliers' fuel mixes just to illustrate this. You can see here for British Gas, they are making it clear in their fuel mix disclosure that 100% of the power sold through their green tariffs is from renewables, but in actual fact, only 24% of the power sold through their other tariffs is from renewables, and 48% overall. I think the next one is from Scottish Power. You can see here that again, they're differentiated between their green tariffs, 100% renewable, and their other tariffs, only 4% renewable. And again, they're looking at a total fuel mix that is similar to the overall UK mix. And finally, when it comes to a supplier like Octopus, you can see that because they purchase and retire REGOs for all of the power that they sell, they market themselves as being 100% backed by renewables. So in order to be able to sell power as green power, even if a supplier is purchasing electricity through a PPA directly from, for example, a community energy project that's running a wind turbine or a solar farm, even if they're buying the power through a PPA, they still have to purchase and retire the certificates that go with that in order to be able to claim and market that power as being renewable. So it's a very important part of demonstrating that a company is doing what it says. Perhaps sort of less familiar to many of you, maybe how the certificates are used in carbon reporting. And before I kind of get into the detail in terms of showing you how it manifests itself in people's reports, it's worth me talking briefly about the different scopes of carbon reporting. Scope 1, and again, these probably aren't technical terms, but this is how I sort of think about it in my own head. But there are 3 scopes. Scope 1 is stuff you burn within your own sites. So primarily that would be gas if you were running a heating system, or petrol or diesel if you're running vehicles. Scope 2 is emissions that are generated in order to produce, in the process of producing electricity that you use at your own sites. And then Scope 3 is emissions that are generated by other people who are doing things for you. So for example, a supplier that is making things for you and then selling them for you to sell on, and outside of your direct control. And since 2015, Scope 2 emissions have allowed you to claim the benefit of matching your power consumption on your sites with REGOs in order to report a very significant reduction in your Scope 2 carbon emissions using what's called a market-based methodology. So you can see here, I've just picked out a couple of very large corporates here. I'm not sort of picking on them in particular. They were just the first ones that popped up in the FTSE index. You can see here that in the case of 3i, they're reporting a market-based Scope 2 emissions of 0 for, and that's through the use of renewable energy guarantees of origin. So these certificates are playing a really big role in the reporting of carbon emissions. And for companies that have made the investment in reducing their Scope 2 carbon emissions in this way, are a kind of very significant requirement for them to continue to do so. A couple of other examples, Aberdeen PLC, you can see down here that the Scope 2 market-based emissions, while not 0 in this case, are still significantly lower than what they would have to report if they reported just the grid mix, which is the location-based method. And finally, Admiral Group, again, a reduction to almost 0 in terms of their Scope 2 emissions. So again, REGOs here playing a very important role for those companies in reporting on their Scope 2 emissions. Now, it's worth flagging, because this is an area that we're working on a lot, that there's no reason why it should only be the electricity that a company uses on their own sites that REGOs are used to match. It is possible for companies who are selling products where their customers use power when they're using those products in their own home, that a company could choose to purchase certificates and match the customer's electricity use with renewables supplied to the grid, and not just the power that's consumed on their own sites. And that's quite an exciting and interesting prospect when it comes to REGOs pricing, because that would create a very significant additional demand for certificates and would have some interesting implications in terms of what prices you as generators might be able to secure when selling those certificates. So I think it's a space that's worth watching. It still needs to be written formally into the most common greenhouse gas reporting guidance that is run by the World Resources Institute, the WRI, although there are other certification schemes such as the carbon neutral one that already recognises the use of these certificates for Scope 3, but it could create a very large additional market and demand for these certificates. So hopefully that's kind of given you a sort of decent overview in terms of why people might want to buy the certificates. And I want to touch upon, the core question of, what's been going on with prices. And there's been some really interesting changes, because for most of their history, renewable energy guarantees of origin have been sold for typically well under 50p per megawatt hour. And if you're marketing, I don't know what arrangements you're able to strike through your own PPAs, but if you're selling power even sort of 60 pounds per megawatt hour, then actually 50p or 35p or whatever is not going to change the mechanics in terms of any financing you're trying to secure or returns for investors. But what's happened in the last couple of years is we've seen the certificate prices increase over a fairly short period for the current fuel mix disclosure year, hit well over £7. And it's worth mentioning that this is data from that's kind of 6 to 9 months old now. It's sourced from Cornwall Insight, who run a regular survey of the buyers and sellers of renewable energy guarantees of origin and other energy attribute certificates. And my understanding is that the prices since then may have grown even further, but I haven't been able to access the data yet. But even if not, that level of increase is really, really significant. And I'd be keen to understand how it kind of plays out against some of the prices that you have both probably embedded within your PPAs or that you're being offered on the market, and whether this is a kind of reflection of what you've also been seeing. When it comes to the impact that has in terms of kind of potential revenue streams for a renewables project, you can do the maths yourself, but if you're selling at kind of £60 per megawatt hour, which would be very positive, then you're still seeing a 12.5% increase if you're also selling the REGOs at kind of £7.50 a megawatt hour. More substantial contribution into percentage terms, obviously, if you're selling your power for less. So REGOs do have this ability to actually add a significant additional revenue line on top of your power revenues if you're able to secure those kinds of prices, and acknowledge that is a big if, and I'm sure some of the supplier representatives on the call will have a perspective on that. In terms of understanding what's been driving those higher reported prices, I think one of the biggest changes, and long overdue changes in my book, that we've seen has been a change in the rules around fuel mix disclosure that has stopped post-Brexit UK suppliers purchasing certificates from Europe to match against electricity that's consumed by their consumers within the UK, which has, I think, almost without doubt, and this is sort of a view that is supported by some of the analysis that I've seen from Cornwall Insight, almost without doubt, the ability to purchase low-cost certificates from markets where there is very large supply of renewables and therefore relatively low demand for the certificates has dampened the prices that we've seen here within the UK. I think the other thing that's been going on is that demand has simply been increasing. Corporate PPAs, for example, where companies are seeking to purchase a proportion of their electricity direct from generators through PPAs rather than necessarily relying on the fluctuations of the wholesale markets, and at the same time to increase their green credentials. Although, again, to stress, if they're only buying the power and they're not buying the certificates, then they're not doing anything that's particularly green. But growth in, for example, corporate demand through corporate PPAs and energy suppliers using REGOs to effectively market as 100% green across their whole customer base has been driving demand for these certificates higher and higher. So what does that mean for you as community energy projects? Well, I think one of the first things I would say is if you're entering into a new PPA contract or looking at developing new assets, monitor the market, access the kind of data from Cornwall Insight and others to get a real handle on what the going rate for certificates is. Because historically, one of the oddities that Cornwall Insight have found in some of their surveys has been that the prices being secured for REGOs through power purchase agreements, which are effectively long-term commitments to pay a particular price for the certificates, have been lower than the prices that have been seen on the spot market. And that is in many ways different to the normal dynamic you would see in many other markets, where you would be the benefit you're giving to the customer in allowing them to de-risk their future purchasing by fixing the price for a set time would result in a premium being applied rather than a discount to the price. So there is an argument to say that people who are buying renewable power and the certificates at the same time and getting security of price on both the power and the certificates should be paying for that privilege and to de-risk that part of their portfolio. And to that point, I think making sure that when you're in discussions with potential off-takers, you understand the value that REGOs have to them. And again, that's why I was keen to talk through both how REGOs are used for carbon and fuel mix disclosure, so that you can enter into those discussions in an informed way and making sure that you've got the kind of the facts at your disposal to really effectively, make sure that you're getting the best value from the certificates that you can. That's the end of my bit. I'm very pleased to hand over to Toby now, who's going to kind of, I've been very much kind of backward looking. I think Toby's going to pick up the reins and look forwards at how the world of renewable certificate is likely to be changing over the next, well, almost immediately, in fact. I'll stop sharing, Toby, and let you take over the reins.
Great. Thank you so much, John, for the awesome introduction. And you've done a really great overview of REGOs and certificates, so definitely made my job a lot easier. Yeah, really happy to be here. So I'll just give a quick intro to me and to the company, and I've got a few slides talking a little bit about how the role that energy certificates might play in the future, and how the certificate system itself might change for the better to help accelerate the energy transition. So yeah, Toby, I'm based in the UK. Actually, as a company, we are 20 people, and we're spread out. Actually, our team is in 5 countries, and we provide software to utilities, energy suppliers, that to help them track renewable energy and manage their certificates and make their supply offers much more transparent, so end consumers can get a much better idea of where their energy is coming from. And currently working with suppliers in 7 different countries. So it's quite an international thing. But yeah, I'm based in London, and my background was, well, I won't give you my whole career history, but I guess the genesis was sort of going back 7 years ago. I was doing a demand response startup, so optimizing electric vehicles and batteries to help balance the grid. And this company was acquired by OVO Energy in the UK, and spent quite a few years with OVO in various roles. But I was always thinking about, well, firstly, how do we balance the grid? How are we going to get the grid to operate on ultra high penetrations of carbon-free energy? It's becoming an increasingly severe problem. But also this other question of how do you choose one type of electricity over another? And so that's what got me on a journey investigating REGOs and their international forms a long time ago. John's done a really good job of explaining why they're so important. So I don't need to do this slide, other than to say that just echo what John has said. REGOs they're the only legal instrument that you can use to say your energy is coming from renewable sources, or that suppliers can use to sell renewable energy to consumers. And the demand, both from individuals and from corporates, is growing very rapidly indeed. And they play this really important role. When I was doing my research, I was absolutely shocked, however, to see that the system has not changed for the last 20 years. These are actually well-established systems that exist in almost every developed energy market in the world. And the main challenge that I saw coming from this perspective of, okay, how do we balance the grid to get accelerate us on the energy transition to a completely carbon-free system? And the main challenge is that the certificates are missing sort of the most critical piece of information today. They tell you where the electricity has come from, but they don't tell you when the energy was produced. And as John sort of pointed out briefly, the way they work today is based on a system of annual matching. So if you use 10 units of energy in a year, and you buy 10 units of certificates, or your supplier buys 10 units of certificates on your behalf, and as long as those certificates were generated in the same 12-month window as your consumption, you can be 100% renewable and declare 0 carbon emissions. And the problem with that is it doesn't reflect the reality of what's happening on the system, right? Essentially, it means you could be buying all of your certificates from, one solar farm in June, and then claiming to use all of that energy throughout the year, including at nighttime in the winter. And obviously the sun doesn't shine at night, so there's no way you can really be 100% renewable with solar alone. Just to point out an example, so it's not reflective of the reality, which is today, sometimes we have far too much renewable energy on the system and other times hardly any at all. And this is leading to a lot of distrust and accusations of greenwashing when it comes to these renewable energy tariffs. And it's also not sending the right price signals to the market, right? To driving the right investments. You want renewable energy to be cheaper when it's in oversupply and more expensive when it's in undersupply. And this is then sending price signals not only for more renewables, but also for things like energy storage and demand response and all of these other technologies which community energy organizations have been talking about for a long time and can play important roles in. And so 2 years before setting up Granular Energy, I actually set up a non-profit standards body called energytag.org, and there's lots of information there. And it's now become the international standards body for time-stamped energy certificates. So these are basically the same normal certificates, but with a timestamp that allows you to see where your energy has come from in a specific 1 hour or half-hour period. And the idea, the benefit of this system is that you can use them to make more reliable claims by linking production with consumption. They become a revenue stream for energy storage and demand response. Batteries can store these certificates when they're in oversupply, put them back on the market when they're in undersupply. You can use them for more accurate carbon accounting techniques, and as Jon mentioned, this carbon accounting standards are being revised at the moment. And we can also create new local price signals that incentivize local consumption of renewable energy. And this is part of now a big global movement to shift these certificate systems and accounting and electricity, and it's called 24/7 clean energy. And you've got big corporates like Google and Microsoft who consume enormous amounts of electricity for their data centers. They have set themselves targets to what they call 24/7 clean energy. And that means they need to see where their energy is coming from each hour of the day. But of course, they can't do that with the standard REGOs or standard certificates wherever you are in the world. They need these new timestamp certificates to actually make that claim and make that distinction. And you're seeing other big energy consuming organizations like the US federal government, lots of companies in the UK like real estate managers, some of the logos here, retailers, they've all kind of expressed ambitions for doing this more granular energy sourcing. And then you've got a whole bunch of international bodies saying we need to do this, like the United Nations. And now there's also some regulatory changes. One example being that in Europe now, if you want to produce green hydrogen, you need to match your electrolyzer with renewables on an hourly basis in order for that hydrogen to be considered truly green. And the BEIS is doing, or Department of Energy Security and Net Zero now is doing a consultation on the future of the REGO system. And this is certainly one thing that was mentioned in a call for evidence that started actually 2 years ago and is now being come back to. And you're also seeing advertising standards agencies like the one in Ireland starting to look at this issue. And this is in Ireland, suppliers have been banned from selling 100% renewable energy tariffs based on annual matching because of concerns over this issue and greenwashing. So there is a lot of change and movement in the market. What we're working on is actually there's one more slide I wanted to bring it to the front. And then this one slide, which is a bit of a sort of future gazing around the future of electricity markets and certificate markets. There is a lot of talk about redesigning electricity markets at the moment, and that we've been quite involved in that debate, and there's a white paper here. But essentially the point that we're trying to make in this slide is, right now, when this is one of the things that confuses a lot of people, you have a wholesale power market, which is already a system of matching supply and demand in half-hourly windows, right? That's the power market that we know today. And it's a matching system, but it doesn't give you any traceability. All of the power is pooled together. So when you go to the wholesale power market, the spot market, you've got no way of determining where that energy has come from. And then you've got a totally separate system, which is the REGO market, which is also about matching supply and demand, but in an annual, on an annual basis. But it does give you the traceability. And so if you fast forward to a future, which is coming pretty soon, where you can have these certificates with a timestamp based on the same metering data as in the power market, you can actually essentially align and bring these two systems together. And that, I think, will solve a lot of the confusion, because people don't understand why am I, I can sign a PPA or buy power in the wholesale power market over here and sign my certificate contract over there, and they're two separate contracts. We see them coming together over time. Just very quickly on what are we actually doing as a software company, we noticed that one of the big bottlenecks or the challenges that is going to be faced is energy suppliers by and large use Excel spreadsheets to manage their portfolios of these energy certificates, which is sort of okay for your traditional annual REGOs, but won't really cut it if you want to move to more granularity. So we provide a sort of end-to-end certificate management platform that helps energy companies to manage their certificates all in one place, and then assign them from the different generators that they're sourcing energy from, assign them to different customers on an annual basis, but also on an hourly basis, and then provide this information to customers through dashboards and reports, so they can create new next generation green offers that sort of fight the greenwashing challenges of the current system. And we're actually working with very large portion of the UK energy supply market today. So these are just some of the dashboards for the people in the utilities, and then the end result is that as any end customers who are on these tariffs can access dashboards and reports like this that disclose exactly where their energy has come from based on the operations of the supplier. And we've actually also got a project in the UK with Nord Pool, who's the power market operator, Alexon, who run the settlement system, Energy System Catapult, National Grid, and various others, to introduce a framework for these time-stamped energy certificates. And this project has been running for a while. We actually just published an updated white paper, which I spoke about earlier, if you want to read more about it on our website. But just finally, we're working with quite a few different energy suppliers, and what it enables is the tariffs of the future, which can give much more transparency to customers. You can create tariffs which are either for the whole portfolio, for just a premium subset, tariffs that are based on the local region, or even tariffs specific to individual customers, which is sort of more for corporates. And you can give customers control over whether they're seeing what type of technology they've got to, the age of the power plant and other attributes, and even show them down to the specific asset level where their energy has been sourced from. And the matching, is done today on an annual basis, but in the future, it will be done on a monthly, daily, or even hourly basis. And our platform sort of automates all of that. Reporting to customers can be much more frequent than it is done today. It's only annual. So we also enable that. And so it's one example of a tariff that is now possible is a local energy tariff, right? If you want to incentivize local consumption of renewable energy, it's much easier to do that using certificates than it is to do it with changes to the wholesale power market settlement rules. And when these certificates are based on the same metering data as in the power market, they actually have just as much physical validity as any power market transaction. And so this is what we like the idea of, and I'd love to, discuss this further with the kind of community energy community, is, how we can use local energy tariffs with the suppliers that we're working with to help incentivize and build a better connection to the renewables in the local area, particularly community-owned renewables. And this is a way to bring more revenue and more engagement. So yeah, that's basically, I whistled through that. Want to make sure we have time for questions, and happy to dive into this in more detail.
Brilliant, that's great. Thank you so much, Jon and Toby. So a couple of top tips from Jon there was monitoring the market and understanding your REGOs value to your customers to ensure that you're getting the best value. And lots of information there from Toby. And I think it was Energy Tag, the website that you said a particular.
Yeah, I'll put some links in the chat. So there's a yeah, that's the non-profit.
Brilliant.
And yeah, I'll just keep putting some links in, and I'll put our website as well, and some my contact details if anyone wants to get in touch. Great,
thank you. And if anyone does have questions, do feel free to put your hand up, and I can bring you in verbally rather than you having to just put messages in the chat. We did have one, but I think it's been answered, but just so that everyone's clear. Question from Dave Powis from Heel: isn't a generator declaration an alternative to REGO to demonstrate where the power came from? So that's that double counting. So is there anything else to say around the generator declaration side?
So the rules in place in terms of fuel mix disclosure require power that's sold as renewable to be backed by REGOs. So whilst generator declarations, I think, are used for some other fuel mixes, when it comes to claiming a renewable component for tariff, it has to be matched by REGOs. REGOs, as Toby said, are the only certificate in the game. So no, there shouldn't be any double counting, certainly where REGOs are used kind of through the official channels. Toby, I had a kind of quick question for you, because I suppose if I was a community energy project sort of sitting listening to this, one of my questions might be, what is granular matching likely to do in terms of how I sell both the power and the certificates that I generate, and what should I be kind of attuned to?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Well, I think there's the quick answer is don't panic. There's no overnight changes on the horizon. What we're introducing is something that will be in addition to and complement the existing REGO system. So it'll take quite a long time before certificate systems around the world are replaced with an annual system and an hourly system. You've got this two regimes. So in the short run, you'll still be selling traditional annual REGOs, but if you're working with if any of your off-takers are suppliers that we're working with, and there's a pretty good chance that they're a supplier that we're already working with, and feel free to contact me to find out. There may well be an interest not only in the REGO, but also in the generation metering data. And that way they can, suppliers can use this to disclose and do hourly matching with to a customer tariff or an individual customer who's interested in this higher level of granularity. And so we think that, over the next year or two, we'll start to see an increase in pricing for REGOs that are sold with metering data. Because it enables this further transparency. And so that's the first thing that I'd look out for, some requests potentially for not only the REGOs, but also the generation metering data. Long term, if we do move fully to an hourly market, it would create further opportunities for flexibility, right? So if you're developing flexible generators like hydropower plants, or you're thinking about doing some local energy storage projects, which are on the horizon as well, then this is essentially a new revenue stream for those projects.
Great, thanks, Toby. Jon, have you got follow-up to that?
Yeah, it was really around kind of, I guess, helping community projects to kind of, I suppose, picture this future. One of the potential implications, I guess, is that demand for low carbon power that is available all of the time is likely to be higher to fill the gaps when there's no wind and there's no solar. And I suppose one of the questions is that likely to play through in the kind of differential pricing that community projects might be able to command depending on what generation type they are? And then kind of linked to that, I think one of the really exciting things about hourly matching is the incentives it creates to create storage that can help to flatten out those intermittency problems. And is there a case for community energy projects where they have, a suitable grid connection and space available on site to be thinking about co-locating storage alongside the actual generation assets in order to be able to capitalize on the market where there's going to be high demand for power at times when conventional renewables aren't producing?
Yeah, totally agree with all of that. I think it's already the case, given the volatility that you're seeing in the market and wholesale power prices, that there's a stronger and stronger business case for co-locating storage with renewables, and this would just sort of further accentuate that. And given the the challenges around renewables integration at the moment, the long waiting times for grid connection, this ultimately has to be a good thing because it will just help alleviate some of these grid constraints. What you can also do, we've talked about hourly matching, but you can also use certificates for local matching. And one of the things that we're lobbying for is to create incentives for consumers to match their consumption with locally produced renewables. And if you do that, you could give a discount, for instance, for people who do a certain level of hourly matching using certificates. Could give them a discount on grid costs, for instance, and that would essentially reduce the pressure on transmission, because you would be keeping that energy in the distribution network. And so you can actually use this as a mechanism to help alleviate grid constraints, which is quickly becoming the biggest challenge when it comes to more renewables deployment.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we're currently at the moment updating all of our kind of key policy asks. So alongside all the stuff that's happening with the energy bill being debated at the moment, but also kind of gearing up for the general election next year and so on. So so these sorts of things really feed into what we're going to be looking at and focusing on over the next year as well. So that's really important. Would anyone be willing to share what prices they're currently getting for their PPA REGOs now? And whether maybe the content you've heard here will make you view future contract negotiations differently? If no one feels quite comfortable sharing it in this space, then yeah, please do drop us a line afterwards and let us know, or I can link you up with Jon and Toby as well. And not to put anyone else on the spot, we've got a few suppliers on the call, so maybe kind of Max or Morgan from OVO or Unity, any of you got any thoughts or anything that you'd like to feed into the discussions?
I can come in if that's any help at all. I can come back on your question, Emma, about sort of pricing we're seeing around the PPA REGOs, the ones that we're offering, and probably Jon in answer to your question about why there's potentially a discount compared to some spot market pricing as well. So yeah, we try to keep as reflective to the market as possible when we're pricing PPAs in terms of the REGO price. So I think Connie from Unity, Connie from talking about Unity's prices are quite similar to ours. For CP22, which is the current compliance period we're in, we're looking at about £7-8. They can be a little higher as well. But then as we go further out, there is a slight discount. But John, in terms of sort of why potentially there is a discount, there could be an answer that there is a variability to the volume we're receiving as a difference to getting sort of spot volume. So there is risk embedded there. So we have to take that into account when offering sort of prices. Yeah.
Interesting. So, I mean, you know, for a sort of reasonably assured base load, you know, there's a certain confidence, but actually it's the accounting for the variability and where you might have to top up or not.
Yeah, exactly. And if a wind site goes down, for example, for a significant period of time, you may be losing out on a large chunk of REGOs that you then have backed against a customer proposition.
Brilliant. So, John, do you have something else you want to come in then?
It was also kind of to ask a question to the kind of the community projects on the call as well. I suppose one of the challenges we've had as we've been seeing this demand from the reason we've become involved in this space at all is because we've been working with mainly, you know, fairly large corporates who are trying to grapple with their emissions reporting and have started asking the question around their scope 3 and the power that's used by their products once they're in the hands of their customers, or even the power that's used by their employees when they're working from home. And you know, we've been out hunting to see if we could acquire certificates for them to see if this is even viable. And one of the challenges we faced is you know, finding suitable supply in kind of lowish volumes. But where we've been able to do that, it's been very positive for the kind of generators because many of these corporates are kind of willing to pay above market prices. So it was really a question for the community energy projects of kind of whether that is even a viable solution, because my impression is that most community projects are in kind of long-term PPAs and that there's not really a, you know, a loose unallocated supply available. But I'd be interested to hear kind of thoughts from community energy projects. And also I suppose that, you know, in a sense for Max's point, you know, if the PPA coverage, you know, the generation you're reasonably confident of, is there scope for, you know, that unknown surplus to be soaked up by these other potential buyers?
Any takers on that? I am aware that everyone knows that this is being recorded, so there might be a little bit.
Yes, of course. Well, I mean, you know, I'd be very interested in people's thoughts, you know, on or offline. So if anyone does kind of have any insight that they want to kind of offer, then do reach out to me separately.
Brilliant. And we do have our monthly member calls and things like that, where we kind of more Chatham House rules and everyone can kind of share information a bit more easily. So, you know, if people are interested in following on this conversation in more detail, then do let us know and we'll arrange that. My feeling is, though, John, I think you're right, that for most of the groups that I know about, they are in longer-term PPAs, and that was kind of always the model that we're based on. But there are a lot of groups now looking at kind of different models and new projects coming online and so on. So I think there is a little bit of opportunity there. Benny from Bath and West, do you want to come in on that, or was it a different question? Benny, did you have your hand up?
Oops, they're speaking while muted. Sorry, my camera's playing up, so unfortunately you've just got the black screen. Yeah, related to that, I guess. So Bath and West Community Energy. Yeah, most of our energy we would expect to sell via PPAs in advance and the REGOs to go with it. I guess I'm interested to put the question back to you. Are there other options that we should be considering? And how should we talk to suppliers about that? Given that we're not the largest, you know, in the scheme of community energy, we generate an all right amount, but in the scheme of suppliers, I don't think we're a big customer that can demand that much special treatment. Yeah, how would you recommend that we go around thinking about our REGOs? And more generally, a thought is that we've been looking recently, I mean, I think it's come up in discussion a little bit already, the kind of question, the point around the need to integrate storage or install generation in slightly smarter ways that will mean that they aren't just outputting the maximum megawatt hours, but at the wrong times of day. However, it's quite hard to find a business case for that, given that it seems like suppliers will be modeling our output using quite a standard model that makes assumptions about all these things. And actually, if we change the way that we generate, we might not be financially rewarded for the benefit we produce.
Brilliant. Thanks, Benny. Two great questions. So one was around how can community energy negotiate REGOs effectively? And the second was around integrating storage into their business cases. It can be quite hard to have a business case in the negotiations with suppliers around their assumptions. So Jon or Toby, who wants to take either of those?
So I'll take the first one, and Toby can take the second one. And
Yeah, sounds good.
For Max again on the second one as well. Well, on the first one, in terms of other options, I don't have the answer yet. There are parts of the puzzle that are starting to fall into place. The most interesting part for me is that you've got this potential demand outside of kind of direct power procurement. So outside of the electricity that companies using themselves, they've got other people who they have responsibility for, whether it's their suppliers or their customers who are using electricity that they need to make sure is matched by renewables. But at the moment, other than waiting for the grid to green itself, or by persuading every customer to switch to a renewable backed tariff, there's really no solution for them. And that has the potential to create this great demand for certificates and potentially an additional market. Now, too much upward pressure on certificate prices would actually undermine the market for certificates by reducing probably demand. But I'm not sure that this is going to happen overnight. And I think translating some of that demand into a gentle upward kind of pressure on certificate prices can have systemic benefits, because the entire point of the certificate system is to incentivize investment in renewables and hopefully with hourly matching storage. And if we've got more demand for certificates, then and people are able to confidently say, I'm going to be able to secure that price for my certificates, then that's a really exciting prospect for attracting more investment, expanding the grid, and potentially bringing other generation types that haven't yet reached scale onto the grid. So I think it's a really exciting space. Within making that happen, there's one thing that is going to be vital, which is price certainty for both the generator that is hoping to secure that income against their certificates, and if you're a large corporate and you're an FD saying, run this certificate thing by me again, how much do they cost and how much are they going to cost in 5 years? Because if I'm going to commit to this budget line now, I need to know what the implications are later. Price security is both. So there's potential to start matchmaking between generation projects that are thinking about coming online and looking for investment, and for those corporates that are trying to find a solution to this kind of scope 3 problem with their carbon reporting, and to start to say, well, enter into a long-term purchasing agreement for the certificates, and you can both solve this problem, and both of you get the price certainty and security that you want to bring those new assets online. And at that point, the certificates will be doing their job. They'll be creating greater market incentives for renewables to come onto the market, which I think is really exciting. The difficulty is that matchmaking, there is no facility there for it at the moment. And so, at the moment we're in the, scratching around in the foothills trying to find where we've got, some companies are interested in it. We've got some generators we're talking to, but it's really about trying to build that ecosystem, hopefully without having a dramatic increase on price and rendering the whole system, redundant. You can see Max nodding at various points there. When I talk about the danger.
If I can come in to sort of back up and agree with your point there, Jon. OVO have announced recently that we won't be buying REGOs, just market-based ones that aren't attached to power purchase agreements. So we very much value the traceability there, but we're also offering a large premium on unsubsidized renewable generation REGOs. So any site that is brand new and not receiving a subsidy from the government that's already being paid for on customer tariffs, we would be offering a premium on the REGO as well. So you can be even higher than the current price we've already advised.
Great, thanks, Max. And Toby, sorry, 1 minute on the code.
Yeah, Happy to do a quick whistle stop, and also great to see you again, Benny. It's been a while. So yeah, I think you've absolutely hit on a key problem, which is that the revenue streams available to flexible assets, whether we're talking about batteries or demand response, have been lacking, particularly at the smaller scale types of storage. And so this is one of the things that we want to do. Right now, the REGOs do absolutely nothing for storage because they ignore the time value of renewable energy. And so by shrinking that timestamp down, suddenly this opens up a whole new revenue stream for storage and other types of flexibility. And I do think there's a really big role for suppliers here. And you will start to see suppliers looking to sort of intelligently source not only renewables, but also contracts with storage operators. The job of a supplier, is already that of matching supply and demand on an hourly basis between for generators and customers. It's just the data hasn't always been there to do it for the smaller scale stuff. But now with software and availability of that data, I think we are going to see much more sophistication, which should result in more, revenue streams and a stronger business case for doing storage locally.
Great, thanks, Toby.
Could I jump quickly back in there?
Yeah, very quick, Benny.
Thanks. That's really fascinating. I guess just from the generator perspective, it seems like very interesting things are happening here. It's hard to quite put my finger on where and how that involves us. It seems like, if I've understood it right, there's two options. Either we try and enter PPAs without selling our REGOs and enter into some sort of future bilateral arrangement with corporates who want those REGOs, but right now there's not a market mechanism for that. Or we expect this kind of market to evolve and suppliers to be the ones who kind of on-sell REGOs to the corporates and to everyone else who wants them, in which case we don't, for us it's a sit back and watch and wait and make sure we get a few quotes on our PPAs to realize the REGO value, but there's not an active role or action for us in kind of driving that market. Just to see if I've understood that correctly.
You want to quickly come back on that, John?
I think that's broadly right. I mean, there are companies who are interested in purchasing REGOs, particularly off community energy projects, because there's a really nice story they can tell, for example, to their employees if they're using them to match home working use. But in terms of you being able to make concrete decisions over the long term based on that demand, it's not there yet. They're probably not at a level where they're kind of able to sign a kind of longer term agreement, although I'm very much expecting to kind of have to go out to hunt for new projects that are able to make that commitment relatively soon. I think most of the scope 3 stuff is more relevant for newer projects than existing projects who are trying to work out kind of how they approach their kind of next PPA negotiation. But it is very much a kind of a keep an eye on the space, and if nothing else, be aware of the demand and therefore kind of the context within which any discussions around price need to take place. And if any of you are in a position where you're looking at new projects, then do please ping me a line, because we've got 3 or 4 kind of multinationals who have a particular kind of problem in terms of this scope 3 problem and have expressed an interest in being connected with those sorts of projects. So if you are looking at new projects, then at the very least, I think it would be worth having a conversation to explore that more.
Great, thanks, John, and thanks, Toby. And yeah, we'll definitely keep talking on this and make sure that kind of we're linking up our members with it and adding it within our campaign as well. We have reached at the end now. So I just wanted to end by taking the opportunity to remind you all that Community Energy England is a membership association. If you're not already a member of Community Energy England, please do consider joining us. As obviously the more members we have, the stronger our voices with government and other key stakeholders. thank you again to our speakers, Jon and Toby. Thank you to Community Energy Fortnight sponsor, Thrive Renewables. And thank you, of course, to all of you for taking up your lunchtime out of the sun and listening to us all talk. I hope you found it as interesting and useful as I have. And please do check out what else is going on Community Energy Fortnight. And sorry, Dave, we didn't get to your answer, but I think there's Jon's responded a little bit in the chat. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy Community Energy Fortnight. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.